Welcome. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about the implications of interactions, mostly how it is that um, I go about keeping track of the relationships that are going on between things, so I can keep things straight in my mind. And this is primarily an approach that's adopted from it's called causal loop diagrams. It's adopted from the systems dynamics community. But if I in fact think about two elements, and I'll just call them A and B. Um, I can think about what happens between A and B in terms of two different ways. One way is that A can in fact influence B to increase, or it can add to B, or the alternative being if I have two elements, and I use these colors on a rather consistent basis. The alternative is that A can influence B to decrease or move in the opposite direction of B. So, and as far as I know, these are the only two relationships that I can have. The two simplest relationships that I can have between entities, unless there's no impact or influence at all, and then there's not really a relationship, is there? Now, as a result of this, after A influences B in this manner, in because systems are all about mutual interactions, the result of this can be that B then influences A in the same way and causes it to increase. And typically we refer to this as a reinforcing structure, that A adds to B and then B adds to A, and what happens is that over time this tends to create an exponential growth pattern. The alternative being that in the second instance that A subtracts from B and then B adds to A. In this particular instance, this would in fact produce a situation where it would be a, a decline in this manner. There's one alternative where if you think about a situation between A and B where A adds to B and then B in fact subtracts from A, because the alternative nature of this, which happens first, this in fact tends to produce a pattern that approaches in this direction, and this is referred to as a balancing loop. So that the reinforcing and balancing loops are the two basic structures that you find in all models, and it's a relatively simple notation once one gets used to it. And one can tell the difference between a reinforcing and balancing loop by simply counting the number of minus, which are referred to as negative feedback loops or negative feedback paths in a loop. And if the number of feedback paths is negative ones is 0 or even, it's a reinforcing loop, and if it's odd, it's a balancing loop. And there could be dozens of elements that are part of this loop as you circle them around. So these are the two fundamental structures, and it doesn't matter how complex the structure is that you're dealing with. Where is this? Here it is. That no matter how complex the model is, it's still simply some combination of balancing and reinforcing structures. So one shouldn't allow the structure to overwhelm you, because it's just like building things out of Legos. It's lots of very simple pieces that go together to create a representation of a complex set of interactions. Now, when the two loops that I initially drew, if I implement them, this is an implementation in Insight Maker, which they're a little cleaner than when you draw them. The causal loop diagram is in fact a qualitative view of an interaction, and we often use a rectangle for something that's that's a stock, something that contains an amount of something that changes over time because of something flowing into it or out of it, because otherwise there's a situation where the notation can become confusing or inappropriate. So the amount of money in the account along with the interest, they interact to create interest, and the interest adds to the principal to create more money in the savings account, and the next time around that larger amount interacts with interest and to create interest and then adds to the principal. For the balancing or goal seeking situation, I have some goal and some current state. The interaction between these two is an impetus for action which migrates the current state in the direction of the goal, so that this gap between the two gets smaller and results in less action during the next cycle. Now, as I said, causal loop diagrams are a qualitative view of a set of interactions, and I find it helpful for me to keep track of what's influencing what by drawing diagrams. Though when I get to a point of asking a question about how much does this influence something else, I then need to go to a stock and flow model scenario where there's a more rigorous set of rules associated with how you put these models together, and stocks are only allowed to change with explicit flows into or out of them, and all of the individual elements in the model have formulas associated with them, so that you can in fact then simulate the model itself, and it will provide you with a view of the implications of the interactions, this being the exponential growth curve that's resulting from this interaction, and this being the movement toward balance for this interaction, whereas this is the goal, this is the initial action, and this is the current state migrating toward the goal itself, and when it finally reaches it, then there won't be any more action. So that these two structures, as I said, the goal, and whether they're in a causal loop form or whether they're in a stock and flow form, they in fact are considered to be fundamental structures which we refer to as archetypes. An archetype is being a well-defined structure that produces a characteristic pattern of behavior, and there are well-defined strategies for dealing with archetypes. And in a future video, I will begin to talk about each of the individual archetypes and the patterns of behavior and the strategies that exist for dealing with them. And there are 12 or 15 of those archetypes. And the benefit is that if we understand what structure it is that we're dealing with, because there are well-defined strategies, we don't have to start from scratch to figure out how to work with them. So this is just a bit of an overview of the implications of interactions and how I keep track of things. And in the focus page where this video is, there are links to the causal loop diagram, to the insight maker models for the causal loop diagram and the stock and flow model, and you can interact with them to gain a better understanding of how they're in fact put together. So hope this has been helpful. Thank you. See you in the next video.